I always say successful money management is you get to the end of your life, you still had some money, a little bit left, or you spent it all, but not negative, and you're meeting your goals, whatever they are.
Often when it comes to goal setting, Kansas State University Family Resource Management Specialist Elizabeth Kish says we think it's all or nothing. We think I have to do this or I have to be focused. However, she says that's not necessarily the best or most successful way to achieve what you're looking for. Instead, she suggests taking the long view on goals. On today's Sound Living, a kinder, gentler approach to goal setting. Sound Living is a weekly public affairs program produced by Research and Extension at Kansas State University. I'm Jeff Wichman. When it comes to setting goals, Kish says even a little progress means a lot. Elizabeth, as we think about goals, we often think about the fact that they need to be something that we can achieve, but sometimes we want to maybe push the timetable a little bit unrealistically. And that's probably what we're going to really focus on today is how we can think long-term when we're setting goals.
That's right. I think often we're very all or nothing. I have to do this and I have to do it really focused and I have to get it done. And it's a one and done, which is also not necessarily the best way or the most successful way to achieve what you're looking for. If you take a little bit of a longer view, incremental or step by step, you can get a lot done. And if we think about it, we all have, I think it's 168 hours in a week. And how much of that do we actually use to achieve our goals, whatever they are, personal, financial, health goals? And some things really do just take an hour a week, but you can make a big amount of progress on a project for an hour or two a week on a regular basis.
So some of this boils down to not only identifying our goal or goals, but then how we're going to achieve them. And you're saying that we need to set aside some time, really be focused in on what we're trying to accomplish.
Well, focused, but also realistic, as you said, and not go overboard. I think take a more kinder, gentler approach to your goals. For example, I'm a big reader, and I feel like sometimes I don't read as much as I would like to. And so I read somewhere that if you just develop a habit of reading like 7 minutes a day, over time, you're going to finish books. And you might then extend it if you have more time. But just that 7 minutes a day can really make a big difference. It's the same with fitness goals. We usually talk about 15 to 20 minutes as a sort of minimum entry point. And if that was all you did was walk 20 minutes a day at a pretty brisk pace, I think you would be, heart health-wise, in pretty good shape.
So we have an opportunity then to maybe use some of our electronic devices to remind us or at least to schedule some things out?
Well, I guess you're taking the benign view of electronic devices, but yes, you could do that. And I actually do that with my reading because I have a hard time stopping at 7 minutes. I set a timer. And then I'm like, okay, I did this. Now I need to get ready for work or something. So, yeah, you can use it to remind you to start. You can use it to tell you that, okay, you've accomplished your goal today for whatever project you're working on. Now you can stop.
So are you a person that likes to write things down then? Do you keep more of a daily type calendar so that if you start a goal in, say, January and you want to see how you're doing in March, do you have something kind of on your March calendar that says, hey, think about that goal you set in January?
Yeah, if I have a goal, I often write down when I do it. So, like, if I have a goal that I want to walk longer, 3 times a week, I will then, when I do it, I write it on the calendar. Or I use my watch, keeps track for me. It tells me, like, what my goal is and then how many times I've done it. It doesn't remind me if I haven't done it. I think some devices can do that for you. Or for money-wise, you know, like I know that I deal with my money mostly just once a month. I pay the bills and I transfer the money. And then I know how much we usually spend and how much, you know, sort of the range of what things should cost. And then periodically, once a year or so, I do sort of a whole review and look at, have things changed? Have we been spending more in one area than we were previously? Is there something that we can do to change that, or have prices increased, and do we need to rethink our budget?
And this is a great time to do that because we're getting close to the end of the year, heading into a new year, and I know we've had some inflation to deal with the last several months, so maybe some of our bills have changed.
Yeah, our bills might have changed, and I think also this time of year, you know, there's also the seasonal increase in the heating bill, and that's something to plan ahead for. You know, you and I have talked in the past about turning down the heat when you're gone and, you know, just turning it up a bit when you're home and at night and that kind of thing. And I think all of those are little goals and things that can really impact your total heating bill. And those are sort of like little things you can do every day, right?
One of the things I'm thinking about in terms of financially, we often set goals to save more, set more aside, put more in our emergency fund. And maybe by changing some of our other goals, we can free up more money to go into those areas?
That's right. These small changes can really add up over time. And so this is also the same sort of longer term thinking about if you want to increase your emergency fund and what you can eke out, or, what you have, what you want to put to it is maybe $10 more a month, but over a year you'd have $120. And that's $120 for your emergency fund that you didn't have previously. And so again, it doesn't have to be a huge amount. It doesn't have to be a huge sacrifice. It's just a consistent practice over time.
Is that one of the keys, is the consistency, getting into a routine? Because I know like with our Watt Kansas, we do that for 8 weeks because that kind of builds up and makes that something that we can then continue as a lifestyle change.
Right. There are similar motivations, but different practices and then different outcomes. But it all is well-being. It all can relate to health. And yes, it is the practice. And it's called practice because we have to practice it, right? Another thing I would say is, and I do this too, sometimes I don't quite make my intended actions, right? But you don't beat yourself up. You just say, okay, well, I haven't walked for 2 weeks, but I'm going to start. Or maybe, I spent a little bit more than I intended to. I went out more than I had planned for. So I'm going to cut back a little bit for the next couple of weeks and just balance, But again, it's about your time horizon, we call it, like how far you look ahead. Some of us, we might have a weekly time horizon, a monthly time horizon, a seasonal time horizon, and then a year, or 5 years. But 5 years is, that can seem far away, especially these days.
But as you age, I think sometimes that becomes more important. I know as I hit certain milestones, I think I don't have nearly as long to save for retirement now. I need to be more aggressive. I need to be more disciplined, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I'm kind of in the same boat as you. We're about the same age. So, it is these milestones, or as you start thinking about, okay, what's my next stage in life, or what's my next transition, if I'm transitioning from work to retirement, or transitioning from school to work, or, like maybe your kids are transitioning, so that means you can transition to a different thing too. And so those are really good times to think about, okay, I have now this amount of time, however it is, and what do I want to accomplish with it?
Yeah, a young family, maybe a newly married couple, may be thinking more along the family line and getting things started, whereas in our case, we may be thinking more about empty nesting and that sort of thing.
Right, exactly. And wherever you're at, though, just thinking ahead can just, there used to be a saying like, well, we talk about when it comes to goals is share them, write them down, and review them periodically, but maybe not necessarily obsess about them all the time.
Well, that's true, because if we focus in on it too much, sometimes it can be kind of that, paralysis by analysis type thing where we just overthink it, and you want it to be something that really becomes a part of your life. And I'm assuming that, as you mentioned, these long-term goals, there may be some shifts and some changes within that time frame. If you set a 5-year goal, it may change 2 or 3 years in.
That's right. And I think the other thing is talking about shifting and changing. We don't live in a vacuum. Most of us live in households, which means we are interacting with other people, and they have their plans and goals. And so it's really important to share and talk about, especially if you blend your money. And if some of these goals involve money, then you have to come to some agreement about how you will work toward multiple goals at one time, or are you going to focus just on one goal at a time and then another goal? These are all very important conversations for families to have. How
do they have those conversations? Is this something that you kind of ease into, or do you just jump in?
Well, I think it depends on your communication style with the rest of your household members. Sometimes we recommend, okay, let's have a family meeting. We're going to talk about finances, but that can be really stressful for some people. So you have to know, how everybody in the family feels about talking about money. And also you have to figure out who needs to be involved in the conversation, too. Maybe the kids don't need to be involved, but maybe they do. If it involves them, they might have thoughts.
As they get to a certain age and they start heading off to college or saving for college, that might be a time to bring them in and say, we can do so much, and then you're also going to have to do so much. So be thinking about that.
Yes, exactly. And I think other sort of conversations with children that are important are like around vehicles, insurance for vehicles, education, clearly, weddings, perhaps, or just launching, like home ownership for the younger generation. Like what might the parents be able to do or want to do, or what are the expectations about those things?
And I guess as part of that, you have to really listen and respect one another's points of view and not be too overbearing. Just because you're the parents doesn't mean you're always right.
Correct. Yeah. Well, I'm not a parent. I'll take your word for that.
I'm a parent, and you are not always right. Matter of fact, most of the times they're going to assume that you're wrong. But they do have their viewpoints, and it's nice to help your kids out when you can. But at some point, as you do start to age, you maybe are not able to help as much because you do start thinking a little bit more about what you need to do as time goes on, because we are living so much longer now that we really need to have that long-term plan, not only just for our work years, but for our retirement years.
Well, and you're so right about that. And I think I've really started thinking about that too, is I have grandparents, most of them lived to mid-90s to over 100. I mean, they all did. And so, that's a long time to live. And we're fearful that we will outlive our money. That's one of the issues. But also just what are you going to do? How are you going to stay active? How are you going to stay interested and curious and all of those things? And I think that all has to do with family resource management. How will you live? Where will you live? What do you need? What sort of supports might you need? And just to start thinking about those things, because it comes faster than we realize, right?
Definitely. Well, we're really focusing in on that quality of life and having it not just living long, but as you say, having a quality to that life.
Right. And I think we want to have quality of life regardless of our age, regardless of where we are. And some of this long-term thinking can help us get there. I mean, it might be fun to, I don't know what a short-term thinking is like go out every night or whatever when we're younger. But then as we get a little bit older, we think, oh, maybe I want to do something else with that money. Maybe I want to like set it aside and go on a vacation. And while the vacation is only maybe a week or a long weekend, it still is something that you might remember more than just going out every night.
Priorities have to come into play here as well then.
Right, and everybody has their own priorities, so we're not judging anybody. It's, what I always say, successful money management is you get to the end of your life, you still had some money, a little bit left, or you spent it all, but not negative, and you're meeting your goals, whatever they are.
You talked about kind of the lifespan and the health throughout the lifespan, and we often look at that in extension as being kind of the mental and the physical and the financial. There are a lot of things that come into our well-being.
That's right, and relational, which sometimes goes with mental, but I think of it as separate. So we call that a wellness wheel, and the spokes of the wheel are the different dimensions of wellness. And then if you draw a circle and draw those spokes and label it, and then you put like an X or whatever where you are on the spoke, if you're pretty round, you could think of that as balanced. Even if you're narrow, you might be balanced but have less well-being. Or if you're further out on some but narrow in others, then it's like you have a flat tire. And so you've got some areas that you might work on.
And that might be a place where we look at some different goals then.
Right, yeah. And think about, this is, again, a place for thinking about longer term or, what are the small, relatively easy changes or behaviors that you could start or stop that will make a big difference in your life. And that's where, you probably want to put your energy, is the higher payoff, but the less effort.
You mentioned family resource management, and that is something that Extension has, and people can get more information from their local county office?
From your county office, also online. And we do have a great pub that I think probably people at this time of year might be interested in. It's called the Financial Checkup. And while, there's pros and cons to setting big goals at this time of year, it's always a good time to do a financial checkup, especially if you haven't done one recently.
That's K-State Research and Extension Family Resource Management Specialist Elizabeth Kish. The publication that she referenced, How Are You Doing? A Financial Checkup, is available from the online K-State Research and Extension bookstore at bookstore.ksre.ksu.edu. For more information on personal well-being, including family resource management, contact your local county or district extension office. Sound Living is a weekly public affairs program produced by Research and Extension at Kansas State University. I'm Jeff Wichman, and this is the K-State Radio Network.